Chapter 3 Tatooine 18 years, 2 months after the death of Emperor Palpatine. A parsec away from Geonosis, there is a remote planet in the Outer Rim called Tatooine. This firmament has 2 suns that distribute their heat in tremendous amounts, making most of the surface a desolated wasteland. It would seem that these extreme conditions would make the planet uninhabitable, but many different life forms do exist on this intolerable world. The surface is nothing more than scorching, blowing sand, but below the harsh surface the depths are pocketed with caches of underground springs that provide precious water to the residents who are brave enough to make this their homeland. The Old Republic had little influence over this planet that was far from the hub of democracy. Tatooine's sparse outposts were under the strict control of the Hutt's criminal organization, but the vast open spaces between these gangsters' havens consisted mainly of moisture farmers. These homesteaders built their commonplace dwellings underground, helping them to achieve a cool environment. Luke Skywalker had finally returned to Tatooine to rebuild his uncle's farm now that the galaxy was under the control of the New Republic. The Empire's Imperial stormtroopers, who'd been duplicated from the original clone army, had destroyed the farm and killed his Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru years ago. They were looking for data that was stolen by conspirators who plotted against the Empire. Suspected of being associated with the Rebel Alliance, Leia Organa's cruiser had been chased towards the Outer Rim by Darth Vader's destroyer. Leia's role on board the vessel was as an ambassador on a diplomatic mission, but she was really bringing this crucial information to her father on Alderaan. Leia and her father were secretly active members of the Resistance. Under orders from Emperor Palpatine to retrieve this stolen data, Darth Vader had attacked Leia's cruiser over Tatooine, but he could find no evidence on board of a coded transmission they had received containing the schematics of Palpatine's newest secret weapon. Leia Organa, the Princess of Alderaan, had hidden the vital data inside a compartment inside of R2-D2 and ordered the droid to flee in an escape pod. C-3PO followed R2 into the emergency vehicle because the stormtroopers were firing on the crew, their blasts barely missing the droids. The escape pod detached from the cruiser and spiraled down to Tatooine. Darth Vader sent cloned soldiers down to the surface to search for the assumed unoccupied vehicle, knowing the schematics must have been placed on board. The princess had sent R2 to the barren sphere to find General Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was known only by her father and herself that the former Jedi Knight was living in seclusion on the dismal planet. Leia knew that Master Kenobi was their only hope, so she hid the plans inside the droid and instructed him to seek the Jedi warrior's help against the suppressive Empire. After the pod crashed in the midst of the desert wasteland, 3PO and R2 tried to make their way to civilization, but the droids were captured by Jawa traders. These strange little scavengers roamed the Badlands in search of junk and spare parts that they repaired and sold to the inhabitants of the planet. Luke's uncle dealt with the indigenous species from time to time. When they stopped at his farm, Owen Lars bargained with the creatures and brought the 2 dust-covered droids. As a lad, Luke Skywalker couldn't wait to escape the confinement of living on this remote and forsaken sphere. The knowledge that each day would bring about the same mundane tasks as the previous days and months and years depressed him greatly. Luke had an adventurous spirit and felt his uncle was holding him back. He thought that he would never be free from his bondage of working his uncle's farm. If Luke had known what the future held in store for him, maybe he wouldn't have been in such a hurry to escape the farm and that constant boredom. Luke Skywalker first saw the hollow image of Leia that R2 projected on the floor of the garage when he mistakenly hit a switch while trying to wipe smudges of blaster fire from the droid.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
The young princess had begged for Obi-Wan Kenobi's help. The only one Luke had known by the name Kenobi was old Ben. He was an odd hermit who lived in the Badlands and rarely ventured out to visit anyone. Luke had been intrigued by this message, but his duty done for this day, he'd gone outside to watch the sun set and then went to bed. The persistent little droid had escaped during the night and continued his search for General Kenobi. Luke would have been scolded by his uncle for losing the valuable merchandise, so he went in search of the little robot. In his pursuit of R2, Luke was attacked by Tusken Raiders, or Sand People, as the residents of Tatooine called them. They were violent nomads who attacked unsuspecting travelers for any goods they could lay their hands on. Ben Kenobi rescued Luke from the murderous creatures when he was attacked by them. His uncle often warned Luke to stay away from this crazy wizard, but when Luke told the hermit why he traveled to such a dangerous area, the old man revealed that he was the Jedi warrior Leia Organa sought help from. He also revealed that Luke's father was never a navigator on a freighter like his uncle stated, but was really a Jedi Knight who fought by his side during the Clone Wars. Luke had decided to join the aged warrior on his important mission after the Empire's stormtroopers murdered his family and left the farm a burning ruin. They hired Han Solo to take them to Alderaan, where they discovered the Emperor's newest weapon against the Resistance, the Death Star. This massive space station had vaporized the entire planet. He paid for his impetuous decision to avenge his family's death when he witnessed Ben Kenobi die at the hands of Darth Vader on the first Death Star. To his complete shock, Luke later learned that Vader was really his father, Anakin Skywalker. Luke was also very surprised to learn that Leia, the beautiful princess he'd helped rescue from the Death Star, was really his twin sister. The Jedi had separated the children at birth, fearing the Emperor would sense their presence and have them murdered because they had inherited the power of the Force from their father. In his quest for revenge, Luke joined the Resistance and helped to destroy the first Death Star. He had witnessed Emperor Palpatine's violent end at the hands of Darth Vader, whose death he also witnessed while on the second Death Star. Luke participated in the birth of the New Republic after the downfall of the Empire, which occurred immediately after Emperor Palpatine's death. He then helped re-establish order within the galaxy. When Leia finally admitted her love for Han Solo, Luke stood happily by the couple's side when they were wed 1 year after the Emperor's death. Luke was elated when Leia discovered that she was pregnant and carrying fraternal twins the following year. Luke was overjoyed at the children's birth, which happened to occur on the exact anniversary of Palpatine's death 3 years prior. Leia had insisted that their son be named Benjamin Bail to honor Ben Kenobi and Bail Organa. Leia had named her daughter Padme Hannah to honor her mother and her husband Han. She spelled her daughter's name differently than her mother's, hoping no one would make the connection to Padme Amidala. Everybody thought the Organas were her real parents. Only Lando Calrissian knew that Leia was adopted. The last surviving Jedi Knight now lived on his uncle's moisture farm on Tatooine. Luke was finally content to reside on his home planet and view the simple yet beautiful sunsets provided each evening. All these memories seemed to flood his mind as he watched the twin suns setting above the desert with his young niece and nephew. It wasn't long before the blazing orbs sunk well below the horizon, and the first distant stars appeared in the heavens above. As a deepening darkness finally took hold of the night, he bid the twins good night, once again warning them about the peril of staying out too late because of the Tusken Raiders. The locals knew enough to stay indoors after dark. Luke entered the humble abode and sought his bed. He soon fell into a deep, troubled sleep. He started to toss wildly as the recurring nightmare began. In his terrifying dream, Emperor Palpatine held him within his deadly grasp. The force lightning that issued from his aged, crooked hands entrapped Luke in sheer agony as Darth Sidious used the dark side of the Force to kill him. Luke cried out loudly in his sleep, "Father, help me, please!" Young Padme Solo rushed into her uncle's chambers where she heard him cry out. "Are you all right, Uncle Luke? Can you hear me?" She turned as her fraternal twin hurried in behind her. "He's not answering me, Ben." Benjamin Solo looked down at Luke with deep concern. His uncle wasn't getting any better. Luke appeared to be having very disturbing dreams lately that were seriously affecting his sleep. If Luke didn't get a decent night's rest soon, the lad feared his uncle would never regain his health. The recently turned 15-year-old asked, "Can you make out what he's saying?" "No, he's just mumbling." "Oh, Ben, I'm so worried about Uncle Luke. Isn't there anything we can do to help him recover? I feel so useless." "You're doing all you can, Padme. The best we can do is keep him as comfortable as possible. His last attack has taken a tremendous toll on his weakened heart, but I am sure if we can keep him calm, he will recuperate fully. He's always been a fighter, Padme, you know that. I am sure he'll get better this time, too. He just needs a lot of rest. Uncle Luke seems to be quiet now. We better let him get some undisturbed sleep. I don't want to wake him. Come on, let's go back outside." "Okay, Ben." The twins joined hands and silently left the room. Luke's vivid nightmare continued. In reality, Darth Vader had turned on Darth Sidious to save his son's life, but in Luke's terrifying dream he joined his evil master in his son's destruction. Vader's own Force lightning shot out at Luke, leaving him utterly helpless. He watched in frozen horror as his father's dark figure approached him. The Sith Lord reached down and lifted Luke's limp body high over his head. He carried his son to the railing that led out over the central core of the Death Star. Darth Vader then tossed Luke into the deep abyss. Luke bolted up from his nightmare. He was shaking badly. He felt chilled to the bone, yet was dripping in his own sweat. His heart was hammering inside his chest. As his eyes focused on his surroundings, Luke realized he was in his own room. He reached out to the Force to calm himself and slowly gained control over his emotions. Luke struggled to stay awake, but it seemed all he did now was sleep. He did not want to slip back into his nightmare. Luke knew that Emperor Palpatine would have killed him if his father hadn't intervened, so why was he dreaming of him so? Vader was incapable of using Force lightning since he lost both arms. How could he envision this in his nightmare? Luke just couldn't understand why he was having such disturbing dreams about his father. Learning all he had, and knowing Anakin Skywalker was released from the dark side of the Force, he could not fathom why. Luke could actually feel the rage emitting from the Vader of his nightmare. The intensity of this wrath was very extreme and was aimed towards anyone who stood on the positive side of the Force. Luke felt pure hatred for himself, for Leia, and especially for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Luke never felt such a penetrating hatred from his father when Darth Vader was alive. Even when Emperor Palpatine held him under his evil influence, he'd felt his father's indecision and regret at having to end his son's life. Luke knew deep inside that what little remained of Anakin Skywalker could not go through with the Emperor's bidding to destroy him. Luke had been right. The good half of Anakin's soul finally emerged to save his son by killing his Sith master. The only other time Luke could recall feeling such deep hatred was when Darth Sidious tried to taunt him into giving in to his anger while watching his comrades die during the battle over Endor. The pure rage that had flowed from the Sith Lord when Luke subdued this temptation was immeasurable. That was what these nightmares were like. The absolute rage Luke had felt from Sidious then, but even more intense. This extreme animosity almost seemed like it was a living force. A chilling shudder of fear ran down Luke's back. Could his nightmares be from a vision? No, it wasn't possible. Both Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine were dead. How could his dream be a premonition of doom to come? Luke shook the eerie feeling. He tried to convince himself that his surreal dreams were due to his failing health. He thought about the obscurity of death everyone faces. Humanity fears the unknown, but Luke Skywalker was a Jedi. Death was not an end to life. It was a new beginning. He knew his soul would be entering the netherworld after his body died, but being in such a weakened state, he thought perhaps his subconscious was twisting his experiences. This idea calmed him, and sleep soon reclaimed his weary body. Much later, young Ben slipped quietly back into his uncle's darkened room. Luke's health had seemed to deteriorate greatly after his last attack, and the twins felt he needed to be watched over constantly. Ben and his sister had shared this responsibility since they brought their uncle home to Tatooine. Padme had watched Uncle Luke most of the day. She had insisted that Ben get some sleep, but he thought she was the one who needed the rest. She had been nursing and fretting over their Uncle Luke since they arrived on this desolate planet. Padme was nearing exhaustion herself. It would never do if she got ill on top of everything else. Ben demanded that she got some proper sleep. When his sister said she was fine and didn't need any rest, the lad almost had to get physical to get her to leave their uncle's side. Padme reluctantly let her brother take her place. Ben quietly approached his uncle's bedside and pulled the hard wooden chair closer to begin his vigil. Luke's MD hadn't given a good prognosis, and he seemed to be getting weaker by the day. Ben was very concerned about his uncle's worsening condition. As Ben sat silently watching over his beloved uncle, Luke's eyes fluttered open. He did not seem to be aware of his surroundings. He wasn't asleep, but he didn't appear to be quite awake either. Luke was gazing towards the end of the bed, and he started muttering. The boy leaned in closer, but could not make out his uncle's words. The youth thought he heard Luke say his name. Yes, the teen was certain his Uncle Luke spoke the name Ben.